What if she never truly understood your value because you were always there? There is a strange psychological effect that happens when someone becomes too familiar with your presence. At first, your attention feels special. Your messages matter. Your effort is noticed. Your patience feels rare. But over time, what once felt valuable can become expected. And that is how someone can have something meaningful in front of them and still fail to appreciate it. Maybe you were always the one checking in, always willing to listen, always making time, always trying to understand her perspective. When she needed support, you were there. When she pulled away, you tried to close the distance. When things became difficult, you stayed longer than most people would have. And perhaps you thought that giving more would make your value clearer. But sometimes the opposite happens. When your effort has no boundaries, people can stop seeing it as effort. It becomes routine. Your availability becomes expected. Your patience becomes assumed. Your attention becomes something they believe will always be there, not necessarily because they are cruel. Sometimes familiarity simply changes perception. Think about something you see every day. You stop noticing it, not because it suddenly became less beautiful, but because your mind became accustomed to its presence. Relationships can develop the same pattern. She may know you care. She may know you'll answer. She may know you'll forgive. She may know you'll come back. And when someone becomes certain that your presence is guaranteed, they don't have to consciously consider its value. But here's where your power begins. Not when you try to punish her, but when you stop giving away what you should be giving from choice. You don't become cold. You don't become disrespectful. You don't suddenly create jealousy. You simply stop abandoning yourself to maintain someone's attention. You have your own priorities, your own purpose, your own standards, your own life. And suddenly, your presence is no longer something automatically available on demand. That doesn't mean you're trying to make her miss you. It means that you're finally recognizing that your time has value too. Because there is a difference between being generous and being endlessly available, there is a difference between loving someone and making them the center of your identity. There is a difference between showing effort and desperately trying to earn appreciation. And when you understand that difference, you begin to move differently. You don't chase every change in her mood. You don't over-explain yourself. You don't keep proving that you're worthy. You allow her actions to speak. And more importantly, you allow your own actions to speak. If she values the relationship, she can participate in it. If she appreciates you, she can demonstrate it. If she wants your presence, she can make room for it. You no longer need to convince someone to recognize what you bring, because your value shouldn't depend entirely on whether another person has the maturity to see it. And this is where the story begins to change. The moment you stop overgiving, you create space. And inside that space, something can finally become visible. What your constant presence allowed her to overlook. Your absence doesn't create your value. It reveals the value that was already there. And once someone is no longer able to take your presence for granted, they may finally begin to understand what they had. And once your presence is no longer something she can automatically rely on, something deeper begins to happen. She starts experiencing life without the things you used to bring into it, not because you disappeared to punish her, not because you're trying to create anxiety, but because you finally stepped away from a situation where your presence was being taken for granted, and absence has a strange way of making ordinary things visible. When you were there, your conversations may have felt normal. Your jokes may have felt ordinary. Your support may have felt expected. Your consistency may have seemed like something she could always count on. But when those things are suddenly no longer part of her everyday life, the mind begins noticing the difference. She may remember a conversation you once had, a moment when you made her laugh, a time when you listened when nobody else did, a difficult day when you were there without being asked, a small habit of yours that once seemed insignificant. This is how absence can create perspective. But understand something important. You don't create meaningful absence by playing games. You create it by genuinely moving your life forward. You don't sit around waiting for her to notice you're gone. You don't constantly check whether she's viewing your stories. You don't post things designed to make her jealous. You don't ask mutual friends whether she's talking about you. You simply stop standing in a doorway where you're no longer being welcomed, and then you continue living. You go to work. You pursue your goals. You spend time with people who appreciate you. You develop yourself. You become comfortable with your own company. And slowly the emotional dependence begins to disappear. That matters because if you're constantly waiting for her to notice your absence, you're still psychologically standing beside her. You're still measuring your worth by her reaction. Real detachment is different. You can leave the door open to the possibility of reconciliation without standing at that door, waiting. You can care about someone without chasing them. You can miss someone without contacting them. You can remember the good moments without pretending the bad moments never happened. And if she eventually notices your absence, that's something she has to process for herself. She may begin asking questions. Why isn't he reaching out? Why isn't he trying to fix this? Why does his life seem to be continuing? What did I take for granted? Those questions aren't something you need to manufacture. Reality creates them naturally. Because when someone has had consistent access to your attention, the sudden absence of that attention can reveal just how much of their emotional routine depended on you. But here's the deeper lesson. Your absence should never be a strategy for controlling another person. It should be a consequence of choosing yourself. If she treated your presence casually, you don't need to force her to recognize it. You step back. If she valued you, distance gives her room to demonstrate that value. If she didn't, distance gives you the clarity to stop investing where you're not appreciated. Either way, you gain something. You gain information. You gain perspective. You gain your time back. And perhaps most importantly, you gain yourself back. Because sometimes the greatest discovery after walking away isn't that she finally misses you. It's that you finally realize how much of yourself you had been giving away just to remain important in someone else's life. You begin to understand that your presence should be shared, not surrendered. Your attention should be appreciated, not assumed. Your love should be reciprocated, not constantly negotiated. And if one day she looks around and notices that the person who once filled a certain space in her life is no longer there, she may finally understand what that space contained. Not perfection, not an irreplaceable fantasy, but a real person with a unique combination of experiences, character, affection, humor, flaws, strengths, and history that cannot simply be duplicated. That's the reality of absence. It doesn't manufacture value. It gives someone the space to finally recognize it. And once she begins experiencing your absence, another uncomfortable reality can slowly emerge. She may start comparing what she had with what she finds elsewhere, not because you asked her to, not because you need to be better than every man she meets, but because human beings naturally compare experiences. When something familiar disappears, the mind often begins looking backward. It remembers details that were once overlooked and measures new experiences against old ones. Maybe she meets someone who gives her plenty of attention, but doesn't understand her the way you did. Maybe someone else is confident, but lacks your patience. Maybe someone is exciting, but inconsistent. Maybe someone makes her laugh, but doesn't share the same history. And that's when she may begin to understand something important. You were never valuable because you were the only person available. You were valuable because you were you. Your personality was unique. Your experiences together were unique. The way you communicated was unique. The memories you created were unique. Even your imperfections became part of the identity of the relationship. Someone else can enter her life. Someone else can offer attention. Someone else can create attraction. But they cannot reproduce your exact combination of qualities, history, chemistry, and character. That is what people often misunderstand when they talk about being replaceable. Of course, anyone can find another partner. You can find another partner too. But replacing a human being isn't like replacing a product. You aren't simply exchanging one person for another and receiving the exact same experience. Every person brings something different. Every relationship creates a different emotional world. Every shared memory belongs to the people who experienced it. And that is why you shouldn't spend your life trying to become better than the next man. That's a trap. Because if your confidence depends on winning a competition against people you've never met, you'll never feel secure. There will always be someone richer, someone more attractive, someone younger, someone more successful, someone more charismatic, but nobody can be exactly you. Your real advantage is authenticity. You develop qualities that are valuable because they are genuinely yours. Your discipline, your humor, your emotional stability. Your ambition, your kindness, your ability to communicate, your standards, your ability to handle pressure, your willingness to grow, those things become part of your identity. And if someone walks away from you, you don't need to convince them that nobody else compares. Let life teach them whatever it teaches them. Maybe they'll meet someone wonderful. Maybe they'll build another meaningful relationship. Maybe they'll eventually realize what they lost. You don't control any of that. Your responsibility is simply to become someone whose absence has substance. Because if you were only providing constant attention, that can be replaced easily. But if you brought genuine character into someone's life, your impact may remain long after the relationship ends, and sometimes that realization doesn't happen immediately. At first, someone may feel relief. They may believe they made the right decision. They may enjoy the freedom. They may assume the next chapter will be better. Then time passes, new experiences happen, new people appear. And gradually, comparison becomes unavoidable. Not comparison driven by jealousy. Comparison created by experience, they begin discovering what certain qualities feel like when they're present and what it feels like when they're missing. That's why your focus shouldn't be on becoming impossible to replace. Your focus should be on becoming deeply valuable. Because the moment you stop competing and start developing yourself, you stop asking, will she find someone better? And you start asking, am I becoming the best version of myself? That's the question that actually changes your life, because someone else's choice cannot reduce your worth. And another person's presence cannot erase what you brought into a relationship. She may find someone different. You may find someone different. But different doesn't mean identical. And the person you were in her life can never be perfectly recreated. You don't need to be the only option. You need to be authentically yourself. And after the comparisons, there is a deeper realization that can change everything. She may begin to understand that what she lost wasn't simply your attention. It was your character. Because attention is easy to replace. Someone else can send messages. Someone else can give compliments. Someone else can make plans. Someone else can offer excitement. But character is different. Character is built slowly through choices nobody sees. It's the way you behave when you're frustrated. It's whether you keep your word when keeping it becomes inconvenient. It's how you handle disagreement without trying to destroy the other person. It's whether you can remain calm when emotions are high. It's your discipline when nobody is watching. It's your ability to take responsibility instead of blaming everyone around you. Those qualities don't appear overnight, and they can't simply be copied because someone decides they want them. This is why becoming valuable in a relationship isn't about performing confidence. It's about developing substance. A man can learn how to dress better. He can learn how to communicate more effectively. He can become more socially confident. But if underneath all of that, there is no integrity, no purpose, no emotional control, the image eventually collapses. People eventually experience the person beneath the performance. And that's where character becomes impossible to fake for long. Maybe she once focused on the things you did wrong. Maybe she overlooked your patience because it was always available. Maybe she didn't appreciate your loyalty because she assumed it would remain. Maybe she saw your effort as ordinary because she had become accustomed to receiving it. But distance can create a different perspective. She may remember how you handled situations other people couldn't handle. She may remember how you listened, how you encouraged her, how you made difficult moments lighter, how you stayed calm when everything became emotional, how you had your own principles, how you kept moving toward your goals. And suddenly, the things that once seemed ordinary can look different from a distance. But don't misunderstand this. You shouldn't build character so that one woman eventually regrets leaving you. That's still allowing her to remain the center of your life. Build character because you want to become a man you respect. Build discipline because you want control over your future. Develop emotional intelligence because you want healthier relationships. Develop confidence because you want to trust yourself. Develop purpose because your life deserves direction. Then, whether she recognizes it or not, your value remains. That's the freedom most people miss. You don't need someone to confirm that you're valuable for you to actually be valuable. And if she eventually realizes what your character brought into her life, that's her realization. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to remind her. You don't have to send paragraphs explaining everything you did for her. Because when you constantly explain your value, you weaken the very thing you're trying to communicate. Let your life demonstrate it. Let your consistency demonstrate it. Let your growth demonstrate it. Let your standards demonstrate it. There is something powerful about becoming a person whose qualities remain valuable even when nobody is applauding them. That's real self-mastery. And perhaps one day, when she encounters people who provide attention without depth, affection without consistency, confidence without character, or excitement without stability, she may remember what was different about you, not because you were perfect. You weren't. Nobody is. But because your imperfections existed alongside qualities that were uniquely yours. That combination is what makes every human relationship different. So stop obsessing over whether someone can replace you. Ask yourself something deeper. What qualities am I developing that make my presence meaningful wherever I go? Because being impossible to replace isn't about being the only person someone could ever love. It's about becoming a person whose character leaves a genuine mark. And character cannot be duplicated simply by finding another name. And then comes the part she may notice without you ever having to announce it. You keep growing, not for her attention, not to make her jealous, not to make her regret walking away. You grow because you finally understand that your future cannot remain frozen around someone who chose to leave. You become more disciplined. You take your goals seriously. You improve your health, your confidence, your skills, your relationships, and your emotional control. And slowly, the person she remembers begins to change. Maybe she expected you to remain exactly where she left you, but you don't. You move forward. That's when the old image she had of you may no longer match reality. She remembers the version of you who was always available, always trying, always seeking her approval. But now she sees someone who has direction, someone who doesn't need to announce his progress, someone whose confidence comes from his own life rather than from another person's attention. And that's the important distinction. You didn't become valuable because she lost you. You became more valuable because you stopped abandoning yourself. If she notices that transformation, that's her perspective to deal with. If she doesn't, your growth still matters. Because the purpose of becoming stronger isn't to create regret in someone else's heart. It's to create peace in your own. And when you finally reach that point, you stop wondering whether she will realize what she lost. You become too focused on what you're becoming to keep looking backward. Your greatest transformation is the one you no longer need her to witness. And now we arrive at the deepest realization of all. You were never supposed to spend your life trying to become impossible to replace, because the moment you need her to admit that nobody compares to you, you're still giving her the power to define your worth. Real self-mastery begins when you no longer need that confirmation. Maybe she realizes what she lost. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she comes back. Maybe she continues in another direction. Your peace cannot depend on which outcome happens. If she returns, don't let nostalgia make your decisions for you. Look at her actions. Has something genuinely changed? Is there consistency, respect, reciprocity? And if she doesn't return, don't interpret that as proof that you weren't valuable. Someone's inability to recognize something doesn't determine its value. A rare quality remains rare even when the wrong person overlooks it. That's why your final objective isn't to make her regret losing you. It's to make sure you never regret losing yourself. You can love someone and still walk away. You can miss someone and still choose your future. You can remember the beautiful moments without returning to a situation that no longer serves you, and perhaps that's the greatest form of independence. You don't need to be impossible to replace. You simply become impossible to betray yourself for. Build your character, protect your standards, keep growing, keep moving. And if she eventually realizes that the person she once overlooked cannot be perfectly recreated, let that realization belong to her. Your job was never to become impossible to replace. It was to become someone you would never abandon again.